Today's podcast sponsor is Hover. Hover.com specializes in domain names, and if you are ready to start something new, head over to hover.com/ordinaryvegan for 10% off.
You're listening to the Ordinary Vegan Podcast, where we teach you everything you need to know about adopting a plant-based diet full or part-time. Our goal is to empower you to live a long and healthy life. You can find today's show at ordinaryvegan.net or on iTunes. If you have any questions, please send an email to questions@ordinaryvegan.net.
Hello, friends, and welcome to podcast number 77, How to Build a Healthy Gut with Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. If we haven't met, my name is Nancy Montori, and I am the founder of Ordinary Vegan, which includes this podcast, the website, the easy 5-ingredient vegan cookbook, and the Ordinary Vegan CBD oil line from hemp. I hope all of you are doing okay and staying strong and staying healthy. Almost 2 months ago, we were all living normal lives, seeing friends, going out to our favorite restaurants, traveling. Then, in the blink of an eye, our world turned upside down. Suddenly, Los Angeles has the cleanest air on the planet. Fish have come back to the canals in Venice, and the water is blue and clear. Lions are taking cat naps on paved roads in South Africa. Rare sea turtles are building record amounts of nests on empty beaches. People in India can see the snow-covered peaks of the Himalayas for the first time because of the pollution plummet. And carbon emissions are falling sharply. They are down 5%. In China, emission fell 25% in 2020. Who knows if COVID-19 will have a lasting effect on the environment? But this is a good reminder that we are in control of the health of our planet by our actions. But this all comes at a tragic cost. All this good news about the environment is the result of the high death rates from COVID-19 and quarantine, and not because we have a strategy or plan for our planet. They say that interventions are more effective if they take place during moments of big change. A 2018 study in Switzerland found that when people were unable to drive and given free e-bike access instead, they drove much less when they eventually got their car back. Another study in 2001 in Japan found that when a motorway closed, forcing drivers to use public transportation, the same thing happened. When the road reopened, people who had formerly been committed drivers traveled by public transportation more. Right now, we are a species fighting for our survival, and we have to be extra grateful when we recover from this. So I am hoping that now that we are seeing firsthand how human activity affects the environment, when things go back to whatever the new normal is, we think twice about every action we take that affects our beautiful planet. Now, let's talk about podcast number 77. Today, I welcome one of the leading gut health experts in the world. His name is Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. Dr. Bulsiewicz is a gastroenterologist and the author of the new book, Fiber Fueled, which is being released on May 12, 2020. I will put a link in this week's show notes. The book includes a 28-day Fiber Jumpstart program with menus, recipes, along with essential advice on food sensitivities. I have read his book, and he does a great job of breaking it down and explaining why gut health is so important and why eating more fiber can protect you against so many chronic diseases. It is so important to me to keep you all safe and strong during this virus outbreak. And over 70% of the immune system lives in the gut. So we need to keep the gut strong to battle this virus. So that is why I am so thrilled to have Dr. Bulsiewicz on our podcast today. So let's get started. But before we do, I would like to thank this week's podcast sponsor, Hover. I know a lot of you are exploring exciting new directions in your life, and that may involve an online website. Well, Hover wants you to start that something exciting with them. With Hover, you can register a domain name for your next venture. Hover has over 300 domain name extensions to choose from when building your brand online. No matter what you want to build, there's a domain name waiting for it, from .dev to .app to .design to .blog to .store, and so much more. And take it from me, you'll find excellent technical support available to answer any questions you may have. Hover knows you will do something that will make a difference. Grab your domain name and many more at hover.com/ordinaryvegan for a 10% discount on all new purchases. Make a name for yourself with Hover. Now, let's welcome Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. Hi, Dr. Bulsiewicz. Thank you so much for joining the Ordinary Vegan community today.
Nancy, it's a pleasure to be having a conversation with the Ordinary Vegan community. I mean, this is the Ordinary Vegan community is my community. These are my people, and I am grateful for the chance to come and sit down and have a little chat with y'all.
Well, I love hearing that, and I love talking about gut health and how it affects our entire health in so many different ways. And you wrote an entire book about it called Fiber Fuels. Can you tell me what your goal was with this book?
Oh, gosh. So, the funny thing about it is this. I am probably the most goal-oriented person that you're going to meet. I mean, I'm just so goal-oriented, and I can't help it. And the funny thing is, it was never my goal to write a book. But I'm here, and it happened. And how did I get here is a question that sometimes I have to ask. And the answer is that there was a desire that I think is an imprint of my soul. It's just a part of who I am, to help people. And I really started this journey when I was a teenage boy, and I made the commitment to being a doctor and went, down a path that was rigorous and intense and exhausting and required a lot of sacrifice, and went down that path because at the end, I really wanted to be in a position where I could help people. And that was always the mission. And in my mind, it was, one-on-one in the office, in the clinic, taking care of people. And, the funny thing is that I found along the way, I found a plant-based diet to be so critical to human health. It reversed my own medical issues. And I found the science, let me just say, the more you know about me, the more you'll find that I'm a man of science. I need the science. I won't believe it if it's not there.
Me too.
So the science was there. And so I brought it into my clinic, and I witnessed hundreds or, thousands of people transforming their health through the power of a plant-based diet. And I never thought that I would be an author. But I felt compelled to share this story. And it started very small and very humbly with an Instagram account with, like, in the beginning, 75 followers. And it took me a long time to really start to ramp that up. And, things happened along the way. And next thing you know, I felt like it's not enough just to have an Instagram account. It's not enough. I mean, with full respect, obviously, to your podcast and all podcasts, which I love doing, just wasn't enough to have, a 60 or 90 minute conversation. I needed to give people more than that. And so I took the entire idea and the entire program. And, I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like no matter what happens in the world, no matter how things change, and obviously things can change very quickly, books will always be the highest level of human communication, no matter what, because you can take an idea and you can invest an entire year of your life into that idea. And then on the other end, a person can pick up that idea and it's 350 pages and they can consume it in a weekend. And so here we are, and we're here to talk about fiber fueled and plant-based gut health and everything that I have found on my journey that I really, truly believe is going to change people's lives and help them to heal.
Awesome. Before we break it down, I just want to say that so many people reach out to me who are trying to be on a plant-based diet, and they're experiencing digestive issues like gas and bloating, or have IBS, IBS, and can't find any relief. And they are constantly trying different diets and can't figure out what is wrong with them. They eliminate grains and they try eliminating nightshades. And there are so many experts recommending all kinds of diets, and it's not helping. What do you say to those people?
These are the same people that I see in my clinic on a daily basis. These are the people that I describe in my book who sit across from me, pre-COVID-19, 3-4 feet away, and they're crying and they're overwhelmed and they're miserable. And, for the last 20 years, we've been fed this idea that restriction is the solution. That if it doesn't agree with your body, then just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. That means that it's impossible for it to agree with your body. But yet people don't get better. In fact, in many cases, they end up on a path that leads to progressive restriction. In some cases, they find themselves on such a restrictive diet that they can't actually keep up their own nutrition.
Yes.
And in other cases, and I think this is not discussed enough, I'll be completely honest with you, Nancy. In other cases, they end up with an unhealthy relationship with their food that could be mild, but it can also progress to severe eating disorders. And I've seen this.
Me too.
Plenty of times.
I have too.
And so, these are things where we're not helping people with these fad ideas and these quick shortcuts and these, ideas of quick fixes. And what we need is not a diet. What we need is not a fad. What we need is a lifestyle that nourishes and that heals. And that's what you can find with a plant-based diet. But the challenge, going back to your original point, the challenge is that the person who needs this the most is the person who is going to struggle the most to make it work. It's like if I say, I want you to be able to play a game of basketball with me. Well, if you have a bum knee, you're not going to be able to do that immediately. You got to rehab the knee before you're able to play basketball. But if you rehab the knee, then you'll be able to engage in that kind of activity, and you're going to be so much more globally healthy as a result of rehabbing the knee and going through the process of rehab.
Okay, so how do we help them? You say in your book that microbiome is as unique as a fingerprint. Can you explain exactly what gut microbiome is exactly, and how does it affect our bodies?
So the gut microbiome, there are these living creatures that are invisible to the naked eye, but they're a part of us as humans. We just don't see them, so it's hard to fathom. But they're they're covering us from the top of our head to the tip of our toes. They're in our mouth. They're inside of a woman's vagina, but they're mostly concentrated inside your gut, specifically the colon, which can also be called the large intestine. These are living microorganisms. The number of them is staggering. There are 39 trillion microbes that are a part of each one of us. And, 39 trillion is hard to fathom. But if you were to take our galaxy, the Milky Way, and take every single star in our galaxy, you have 100 times that number inside your gut. It's quite unbelievable. And what we have discovered is that, Nancy, there has never been a moment in human history where we did not have these microbes. They've always been a part of us. They're a part of our identity and our biology and our physiology. They have intertwined themselves with the mechanics of how our body functions. And we rely on them. We trust them. We expect them to do their job for us and to help us. And when they do, they are the engine that drives human health. And it's more than just digestion. I mean, everyone knows that these microbes are involved in digestion. That's the simple part. But they're also deeply involved in our metabolism. You know, if you're concerned about your weight, this matters a lot. If you have type 2 diabetes, this matters a lot. If you have a concern about heart disease, this matters a lot. They're intertwined with our immune system. You can't separate them from the immune system, which, by the way, this seems even more important today in the center of the COVID-19 crisis than, perhaps it did a year ago, but it should always be important. Our immune system is what protects us from disease, not just viruses, not just other microbes like bacteria, but even cancer. And 70% of our immune system lives in our gut. They're intertwined with our brain, the way that it works, our mood, our cognition, our ability to think, our memory. That's really powerful. They're intertwined with our hormone balance. And finally, perhaps the most crazy and impressive thing, but it's actually quite hard to kind of wrap your mind around, they actually can control our genetics. Our genetics are not a predetermined list of diseases that we're going to have no matter what happens. That's not the way it works. Most of our genetics, it's like a switchboard. And if you flip the switch, you could potentially turn on the gene, and that could potentially mean that you have a disease. And guess who's running the switchboard? Guess who's in control? Our microbiome. So it goes beyond digestion, immune system, metabolism, hormonal balance, our brain and the way it works, our genetic expression, all of this stuff, it all comes back to the gut. And this is why doctors these days are increasingly accepting, mainstream medicine are increasingly saying that all health starts in the gut and that you need to take control of your gut health. Even if you're in health, you need to take control of your gut health.
Well, is microbiome hereditary?
There's a hereditary element to it. There certainly is that. You inherit this from your mother, and that is a starting point. But that's not the way it's not stagnant. It doesn't stay that way throughout your life. It's constantly evolving and adapting. Let me give you an example. They did a study back in 2014 that was at the time very novel. They wanted to know, can you change your diet can you change your microbiome with food? And the answer to the question really sort of shocked the scientific world. In less than 24 hours, there were dramatic changes to the gut microbiome when people changed their diet.
Wow. So the microbiome can be reconfigured in a lasting way as soon as you change your diet?
When you change your diet, you are starting to implement change through the microbiome. It's not something that is going to change in 24 hours to the point that that's a lasting effect. But what you're doing is you're already starting to introduce those changes within, literally you have lunch and you are introducing changes as a result of that. You are shaping and molding your microbiome. And it's more than just diet. Diet, we believe, is the dominant factor. It's more than diet. It's your lifestyle too. Your microbiome is a reflection of your lifestyle, your sleep patterns, your exercise, your mood, your stress, whether or not you've been exposed to trauma, your relationships with other people, where you live, how much time you spend outdoors, whether or not you have pets. All of these things have a say in what your microbiome ends up looking like.
So, how can we improve our gut microbiome?
Well, I would separate it into two basic ideas.
Okay.
The first is food, and the second is your lifestyle, diet and lifestyle. This is how we can change our microbiome. When it comes to food, they've actually done a study, Nancy, to answer this question. It's called the American Gut Project. It is the largest study to date to make the connection between our diet and lifestyle and our gut microbiome. It's actually an international study, more than 150 countries represented. And here's what they found. When they performed their analysis, asking the question, what is the single most powerful determinant of a healthy gut microbiome? There was a clear-cut winner, a clear-cut answer. And that is the diversity of plants in your diet.
Wow.
And believe it or not, that was more powerful than whether or not you were a vegan. Because you could be vegan and you could eat junk food all day and not have a wide diversity of plants. And that actually is not as healthy as we want it to be. You need to get that variety of plants in your diet in order to feed your microbiome. And the way that this works, just to kind of unpack it a little bit, because it actually makes complete sense. The way it works is this. All microbes, just like us, have dietary preferences. Some like fat, some like sugar, some like fiber. The good news for a vegan is that the ones that are anti-inflammatory, that want to actually heal your body, they like fiber. Those are the ones that like fiber. Those are the good microbes. And so each type of fiber is unique. People act like fiber is fiber. It's all the same. Who cares whether you got it from cereal or from eating a black bean? But that's simply not true. There are at least millions, if not billions, of types of fiber that exist in nature. We honestly don't even have an estimate of how many. And each one has its own unique biochemistry, and each plant has its own types of fiber. So to put into perspective, let's just use the black bean as an example. You eat black beans, and because of the unique types of fiber and resistant starch that are in black beans, you are feeding specific bacteria in your gut, and those bacteria thrive, they go stronger, and they're able to have a more powerful effect in your body. In this case, because they're anti-inflammatory, they reduce inflammation, they protect you. The flip side is you eliminate beans. You restrict your diet. You toss the beans in the trash can. And now those same microbes that, were thriving, they're now receding. They're growing weaker. And at some point, if you don't feed them, they're going to just die. And so that's the way it works with each individual food. Every single food has its own unique family of microbes that it's going to feed. So what we want is we want a diverse microbiome. A diverse microbiome has all the tools to make you successful. And the way that we get a diverse microbiome is by feeding all of these unique microbes the diverse varieties of food that we possibly can. All the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, seeds, and nuts, legumes.
Well, what do you say to people that have a real problem with, especially starting out on a plant-based diet, eating beans and some legumes? How do they get over the hump of having gas and bloating? And, can they build that up? Can they build some strength up in their gut?
They 100% can build up strength in their gut. The key is this, and believe it or not, this is an entire chapter in my book, and I think this probably is the most important chapter. Chapter 5, how to find your plant passion with a sensitive gut. And the way to think about it is this. Your gut is a muscle. It can be trained. You can make it stronger. But if you don't use it, it will get weaker. So when it comes to black beans, let's pretend that we are going to exercise our gut with black beans. Using the exercise analogy, if you go to the gym and you do way too much all at once, you just push yourself way harder than you should, you're going to hurt yourself. And that's what the person who's not used to eating beans does when the first time they eat beans, they're having the 4-bean chili. You took it too far. You did too much all at once. But if you get just the right amount of beans, similar to getting just the right amount of exercise, your body will actually adapt to the training that you're giving it, and it will come back stronger as a result of it. You are putting a little bit of stress on the gut, and by putting a little bit of stress on the gut, you actually come back stronger as a result. Now, let's take a person's knee and use that analogy again. When you rehab your knee, you know it's going to hurt. But you accept that because you recognize that you have a damaged knee, and the best approach is to strengthen the knee and rehab it so that you can get back to walking. And, most people would recognize that when you have a hurt knee, it's damaged. It doesn't really make sense to stop walking permanently and get a motorized scooter. But the problem is that's the only way that you can do it without having any pain at all. When you rehab your gut, you need to recognize that there may be some gas and bloating involved. There may be some discomfort. I'm not telling you to just grit your teeth and take it. We will make adjustments so that you will be able to tolerate it better. But at the end of the day, you need to recognize that's part of the process of getting your gut back, building your strength up, and emerging on the other side with a strong, healthy, vibrant, diverse gut that is capable of, frankly, eating whatever you want and not having to live in fear of food sensitivity.
That is so good to hear. I always say that. I agree with you 100%. And it's just a matter of time that people will get used to these certain foods that they haven't been eating their entire life,
Yeah, the problem is if you don't eat these foods, or if you engage in a fad diet that tells you that lectins are bad, or that beans and grains are not ancestral foods and therefore you shouldn't eat them, when you go to come out of that diet and you decide that you want to try a plant-based diet, you're actually the person who's going to struggle the most to eat these foods because you haven't been doing it. So your gut is weak as a result of that.
What do you think of the paleo diet?
Well, first of all, let me say this. Whether it's paleo, keto, Whole30, anything, lectin-free.
Yep.
Whether it's, no matter which of these diets we're talking about, I hope there are people listening to this podcast right now who have tried these diets and they're looking for solutions. And I want them to know that I actually respect and admire those people so much, I can't even tell you. Because those are the people who are actually motivated and willing to change their diet in the name of their health. I can't tell you how much respect I have for that. The problem is that the system is feeding the layperson bad ideas. And it's not the layperson's responsibility to be able to understand that these ideas are flawed and not scientifically rigorous. That's where people like myself need to speak up and show people. That's what my book is about. I want to show you the flaws in these diets. So let's take the paleo, for example. There are some things that I really love. I think it's great that you get rid of processed food. I think we all agree on that. The concern with the paleo diet is that it never started with science. It was always built on an idea. And the idea is a flawed idea. The idea here is we need to return to our ancestral diet. This is the way that we ate for thousands of years, millions of years. So we should go back to that. But the problem is that defining an ancestral diet, it doesn't exist. There's no such thing. People started in Africa, radiated across the globe, and wherever they lived, they ate off the land. Whatever the ecosystem provided, they ate. And now here we are, and we're trying to do our 21st century rendition of what we think that is, but it's completely contrived. And, they create these rules like you should get rid of beans, you should get rid of grains. And it's based on the premise that, we're not adapted to those foods. We're not capable of eating those foods. Okay, I see what you're saying, but what does science say? Because if science has a clear-cut message, we should let science be our compass to better health, not just some idea. And when we look at the science, what do we see when people eat beans and eat grains? They live longer. They have less heart disease, the number one killer. They have less cancer, the number two killer. All of these people who are throwing the beans and the grains out are the people who would be living longer with less heart disease and less cancer if they brought them back. So I feel like, the paleo idea, paleo can, Nancy, be, in theory, a healthy diet with the proper modifications. I agree with elimination of processed food. You can make this a predominantly plant-based diet. I understand that I'm on the Ordinary Vegan podcast. From a nutritional perspective, I don't see advantages to meat. I don't see any reason. There's no study that says that you live longer by consuming meat. But I do think that we need to create pathways for people to start to introduce a plant-based diet and move the needle over the course of time. I think that the strongest argument in terms of a 100% plant-based diet, the strongest argument is veganism. The strongest argument is the ethics of animal welfare and the environment. That's truly the strongest argument. From a nutritional perspective, we have plenty of examples of people who are, 90% plant-based and they live a very long and healthy life. So I must acknowledge that I believe that is a healthy diet. I think it could be even healthier. But I think the point from my perspective is if you took paleo, if you really are adherent to paleo, bring back the beans and the grains, make it as plant-based as you can possibly make it. Don't overemphasize the meat or the eggs. And then you are moving the needle in the right direction with regard to that diet, and you're getting closer to what I think is actually a truly healthy diet.
Well, what would be the symptoms associated with damage to the gut microbiota, also known as dysbiosis?
Yeah, dysbiosis is the correct term. You will hear people use the expression leaky gut, or they'll post that on the internet.
Yes.
And you got to be a little bit careful when that starts coming out, because many times it starts to spin away from science and just kind of be ideas that have been regurgitated and like sort of echoed on YouTube that aren't necessarily scientifically grounded. Dysbiosis is the correct term for damage to the gut. And how does it manifest? There are many different ways. Most people who have dysbiosis will have some variety of digestive symptom: gas, bloating, abdominal pain, discomfort, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation. But with that being said, it could be fatigue, could be brain fog, could be rashes. And then there's the laundry list of medical conditions. So we already discussed that not only is the gut connected to your digestion, but the gut is also connected to metabolism. So obesity, type 2 diabetes, coronary artery disease, all connected back to gut microbiome. It's connected to your immune system. Name any immune-related condition: asthma, seasonal allergies, eczema, autoimmune diseases, celiac, Crohn's, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis. Every single one of these things that I just named, and I could rattle off 50 more, they're all connected back to damage to the gut microbiome. Every single one.
Wow.
We talked about hormonal balance being important. So in women, estrogen metabolism is intertwined with gut health. So what we find is that, no surprise, things that involve alterations of estrogen balance also are associated with damage to the gut. So I'm talking about endometriosis, talking about polycystic ovary syndrome, endometrial hyperplasia, and even types of varieties of cancer that are connected to estrogen metabolism, like breast cancer, endometrial cancer, ovarian cancer, have all been connected back to gut health. And then finally, with regard to our brain and our cognition, mood, depression, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, ADD, autism, all of these things, again, connected back to the gut. So you see that there is this central place so important to human health. Most people who have damage will manifest digestive symptoms. That's why they show up in my clinic. That's why I take care of them. But many times I will look at my patient and they'll give me this list and they'll say, "Doc, I'm here for my digestive issues, but I also have anxiety. I'm depressed. I get migraine headaches. I have thyroid problems, and I'm having eczema and seasonal allergies." And I look at that entire list and I say to myself, there's one thing that connects all of this, and that's the gut. And when I heal their gut, there's a chance that every single one of these things that they're describing to me, it could improve. And many times we see that.
Wow. I have a 23-year-old nephew who is suffering from gout, which I always associated with an old person disease. Could that possibly be connected to poor gut health?
Oh gosh, that is a good question. I'm like going all the way back to my studies for writing this book about whether or not gout is related back, and I think I think that there is a connection between gout and the gut microbiome, but I would have to check.
Okay,
Gout.
I was just curious if
Yeah.
just does it go that far? And is it true that we have more bacterial cells than human cells, meaning we're more bacteria than human? And can you address what is good bacteria and bad bacteria, because that is always associated with gut health?
It is indisputable, we are more bacteria than human. We have 39 trillion microbes, and the highest estimate that you will find for human cells is about 30 trillion. So at a minimum, we are more than 50% bacteria. But what's interesting is if you were to take away like red blood cells or take away platelets, which actually make up the vast majority of human cells, but they don't have a nucleus. It's not sort of the classic cell that you think of. If you take away those cells, what you would find is that we are more than 90% bacteria.
Wow.
So, and, Nancy, take it a step further, our genetics, we think of ourselves as like, our gene pool is like a roadmap to human health. This is what they thought when they cracked the human genetic code in 2000. They really believed that they would like find the cure for cancer. The reality is we are less than 1% human in terms of our genetics. 99.5% of our genetic code comes from these microbes. 0.5% comes from actual human DNA. And our human DNA, just to keep going down this crazy rabbit hole, I can't help myself. Our human DNA, Nancy, you and I are 99.9% the same in terms of human DNA. But in terms of our microbial DNA, we could be 0% the same. That's how unique our gut microbiome is. It's truly bio-individual. So now to answer your question about the microbes, good versus bad,
So is bacteria microbes? Is that the same word?
Microbes is a broader umbrella term that I use because it allows me to include, without having to get too explicit in the details, it allows me to include the bacteria, which are the dominant ones, and this is what we tend to focus on, are the bacteria. But we also have fungi or yeast. We also have these really cool ones called archaea. Some of us have protozoa, which some might call parasites. And finally, we have viruses, and they're all 5 of them are living in balance and harmony as a part of our gut. So now, good versus bad, we use these simple terms when in fact, we all know that it's far too simple to like call anything just good versus bad. I mean, it's kind of like human beings, right? Like, I would love to believe we're all good, but we all have flaws too, right? So there's complexities that exist. And I think that that's true of our microbiome. But that being said, there are certain patterns that are quite clear, which is that, bacteria that consume fiber, that thrive when you feed it fiber, produce what are called short chain fatty acids, which are like capable of healing throughout the entire body. And those bacteria would be universally accepted as being anti-inflammatory, which is good. And the flip side is that you have some bacteria that thrive on animal fat. And what happens when you eat animal fat, let's pretend the person eats a steak. The liver starts to crank out bile. Bile is what pools in the gallbladder, and it's designed to help you to absorb the fat. All right, that's what bile does. Well, bile by itself, when it starts getting cranked out, will actually lead to changes in the gut microbiome. And it requires the gut microbiome to have specific species that actually can survive with all that bile that's getting cranked out. We call these bilophilic bacteria. Well, here's the problem. These are inflammatory. These are inflammatory. An example of this is one called Bilophila wadsworthia. Bilophila wadsworthia. Again, it like loves animal fat. It loves bile. Well, biofilm wadsworthia has been clearly associated with the development of inflammatory bowel disease. We have other examples, these ones that love bile, where they actually thrive on converting bile into what are called secondary bile salts, which have been associated with numerous types of cancer, including colon cancer, the number 2 cause of cancer death in the United States. So I think it's fair to draw this line in the sand, even though we're probably oversimplifying it a little bit. I think it's fair to say that we see these patterns where eating a plant-based diet leads to anti-inflammatory microbes, which are good. And it's no coincidence that we call it an anti-inflammatory diet. We call it clean or we call it anti-inflammatory. Well, that's no coincidence. That's the type of bacteria that you're actually fostering in your gut. And the flip side is, an inflammatory diet, which is heavy on animal products, heavy on processed foods, heavy on processed sugar. And that diet is basically creating these bacteria that, again, can cause cancer, can cause heart disease and things of that variety.
What about oil? Many of the famous plant-based doctors like Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Greger, Dr. Campbell don't recommend oil of any kind. What is your opinion about oil in your gut?
Well, I think what you do is you start by saying, let's forget my opinion. Let's look at the science. What does the science say? And what it shows is that when a person takes vegetable oil and they start ramping up, this is a human study, by the way. They took a group of people and they had them take a varying amount of calories from oil. And quite importantly, they kept the amount of fiber consistent. So, it wasn't the fiber, it was just how much oil are you taking. And what they saw is that as people ramped up the oil consumption, it actually had dangerous effects on the gut microbiome. So oil is not advantageous to the gut. And I want people to keep in mind when it comes to oil, that oil has, if you take a pound of greens, 16 ounces of greens, it's quite remarkable. There's only 100 calories. That's crazy. 100 calories in a whole pound of food. And think about the nutrition. And the alternative, or like the opposite of that, is oil. 1 pound of oil has 4,000 calories. You have 40 times more calories, ounce for ounce, in oil than you do in greens. So there is also zero fiber in oil. Zero. There's no advantage. There's no advantage to oil.
That's what I say all the time.
Do I think that people can be healthy with minimal to moderate consumption of oil? Like, do I think that every person needs to be 100% no oil? That's a debatable thing, right? So, because Nancy, that's kind of like saying, hey, Dr. B, I saw you had an IPA last night. You had a beer, and you know what I would say? Yeah, I had a beer. Like, and I'm not doing that because I think it's going to make my gut healthier. I'm doing it because I like having a beer. So it's really up to a person's own decision. But I think if we're talking from a purity perspective, Nancy, for being purely scientific, there's no advantage to using oil. That's for sure.
Thank you. So in your book, you recommend fermented foods for gut health. And if someone wanted to add fermented foods into their diet, where should we start?
Oh, wow. I love fermented foods. These are traditional foods. Every food culture, scattered around the world has a celebrated fermented food tradition. And, it depends on what taste you like. Here's what I will tell you. I am in love with sauerkraut. And I never liked sauerkraut as a kid. And I think it was because it was soggy and just nasty. But as an adult, I love it because it has this vibrant flavor that cuts through other flavors and stands out and adds a new dynamic to plates and dishes. And it's crunchy and it's delicious and it's insanely healthy. So I like fermenting and making my own sauerkraut, which, by the way, in the book, I actually give you my recipe that I use. It's easy to do. It's not hard. Anyone can do it. So So I'm a huge fan of that. I see, certain trends in fermented foods happening. I see like kombucha being very popular. And, I see people who think, oh, if I could drink 32 ounces of kombucha per day, my gut will be healthy. Well, that's not the way it works.
Yes, I know. You have a lot of recipes in your book. Can you tell us a little bit about the recipes?
Oh, I'm so proud of these recipes. So they were developed with my friend Alex Caspero. She is a registered dietitian and also a plant-based recipe developer. The meal plan is 100% whole food plant-based. It is a 4-week plan. The reason why it's 4 weeks, so it's entirely laid out, and like you basically just, you follow the plan. It lays it out for you what to do. The reason why it's 4 weeks is because as I was studying and preparing this book, I just kept coming across time after time this magic number. In 4 weeks, you change your gut to this or to that. Just kept popping up. So I was like, okay, I got to make the plan 4 weeks. So we have almost 80 recipes in the book, and it's all laid out in a 4-week plan with weekly shopping lists. And it's designed to be an experience. It's not designed to be like a Whole30 where you do it and then it's like some stamp there you brag that you did Whole30. This is more like we're getting the ball rolling on a new lifestyle.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not a diet. It's a lifestyle that heals and transforms. And the experience is going to be unique. The way that you would do it, Nancy, is going to, I guarantee, be different than the way that I do it. And I'm actually encouraging that. I want that. I want it to be unique. I want it to be your own path because, like we said in the beginning, you have a unique gut microbiome. It's totally different than mine. And we need to nurture that gut in its own unique way and foster it.
Now, do you have an online course?
I have an online course that is going to be launching, I hope, in June. The virus has slowed some things down.
Yeah, it sure has.
But I have beta tested it twice. I've done 2 groups of people that have come through my beta version of the course and have had like actually amazing results.
And that will be a 4-week jumpstart also?
It's actually going to be a 7-week, and it's actually meant to be a standalone, independent of the book. Originally my plan was to do 4 weeks and have you do the meal plan during the course. But the more that I tested it with the beta groups, the more that I realized that what I need is actually, I just need to give people the information to empower them to heal themselves before they go to do the 4-week plan.
And what will that course be called?
Oh, gosh. I haven't committed to a name yet, so don't hold me to it. Yeah. I've been calling it Reversing Dysbiosis. That's what I've been calling it, Reversing Dysbiosis. But I probably am going to try to sit down and come up with something more creative in the near future.
So the very last question I wanted to ask you, even though I could talk about this all day, can a healthy gut protect us from COVID-19? Is there a connection that you know of between COVID-19 and gut health?
So I am completely convinced that there is a connection. I have not yet seen the study necessary to tell me whether there is or there is not, where I can speak on completely firm ground. But let me say this. There is no doubt in my mind that now more than ever, gut health is critical. Gut health becomes more important than ever, even if you're in complete health, because it is so deeply intertwined with our immune system. And I see studies, we're still in the process of learning about this particular SARS-CoV-2 virus, but I see studies that inform the way that I feel and the importance of doubling down on a high fiber diet, a plant-based diet. I'll give you an example. There was one study, and just to be completely clear, I want people to know I'm just describing what the study showed. I certainly don't advocate for animal testing or anything of that variety. But there was one study where they actually administered the influenza virus to mice, and they fed them either a high fiber or a low fiber diet. And what they saw, again, influenza is a respiratory virus, not exactly the same, but there's a lot of overlap and similarities. What they saw is that the mice that received the high fiber diet lived longer with less symptoms, and objectively their lung function was superior. It was better. And the scientists were actually taken aback and like this was the opposite of what they expected, because they thought, well, fiber is anti-inflammatory. So if it's anti-inflammatory, wouldn't that reduce the immune system and make them more vulnerable and susceptible to a virus? The answer was no. Here's what happened. This is what they realized as they dug deeper and figured this out. They discovered that what was happening is that the fiber was going down and interacting with the gut microbes. The gut microbes would consume the fiber and release what are called short-chain fatty acids. Short-chain fatty acids I alluded to a little bit earlier. They're an entire chapter in my book. I'm obsessed with them. They're healing throughout the entire body. They heal and reverse dysbiosis. But in this particular case, here's what the short-chain fatty acids were doing. Jumping in the bloodstream, traveling to the lungs, and in the lungs, recruiting the proper cells, the CD8 cells, into the battle. You're getting the right soldiers on the battlefield. And then simultaneously, the rest of the immune system, you don't want the immune system to go nuclear. When the immune system goes nuclear and just starts unloading all of its weapons and guns and bombs all at once, that actually is really bad for us. That's how people develop what's called ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. So you got to keep the immune system at bay while letting the right guys put up the fight. And that's exactly what these short-chain fatty acids did. They got the right guys on the battlefield and they kept the rest of the immune system at bay. So what you see is you see an immune system that is precise, it is optimized, it is targeted. We don't want more immune system. That's not the way that this works. We don't want more. What we want is precise, optimized, targeted. And that's what you get with gut health and with a high fiber diet.
Wow, that's great information. And isn't the human body just incredible how it operates? And, we can never take it for granted. Dr. Bulsiewicz, thank you so much for spending all this time and sharing all this incredible knowledge with the ordinary vegan community today.
Thank you, Nancy. It's my pleasure. And, I could talk all day about this stuff. I love this stuff.
Yes, me too. Well, thank you, and stay well and stay strong.
You too, Nancy. Take care.
Thanks, everyone, for listening, and thank you, Dr. Bulsiewicz. You can order his book, Fiber Fueled, on Amazon today, and I will provide a link in today's show notes. You can follow him on Instagram at The Gut Health MD. While you're there, don't forget to follow Ordinary Vegan on Instagram at Ordinary Vegan. You can find this week's show notes and all my CBD from hemp products at ordinaryvegan.net. You can buy my book, The Easy 5-Ingredient Vegan Cookbook, on Amazon. And thanks to everyone who has been posting photos of the recipes and tagging me. I am thrilled you are enjoying it. Please join our health and wellness community on Facebook, which is over 310,000 strong, at facebook.com/ordinaryvegan. Till next time.
Thanks for joining our plant-based community today. Together, we can accomplish great things. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of Ordinary Vegan's recipes and plant-based tips. If you have any questions or feedback, email us at questions@ordinaryvegan.net. Until next time.